The maid wasn't supposed to cry in the kitchen. Not in this house. Not in his house. Because in Chicago's underground world, grown men, men with guns, money, and blood on their hands, went quiet when Damian Cross entered a room. And tonight, Damian Cross was standing right behind her. Elena Brooks didn't hear him at first. The mansion was silent, too silent. Midnight silence. The kind that makes every breath sound loud. The kind that makes you feel your heartbeat in your throat. Elena gripped the edge of the marble counter, her fingers trembling so hard the dish towel in her hand twisted into a rope. A tear slipped down her cheek. Then another. She wiped them away quickly, panicked, because crying wasn't allowed here. Crying was weakness, and weakness got noticed. Weakness got punished. She told herself she'd be fine. She always did. But tonight wasn't like the other nights. Tonight something snapped inside her, and the pain finally spilled out where it shouldn't. A voice cut through the silence behind her, low, calm, and dangerous. "Why are you crying in my kitchen?" Elena's blood froze. She turned slowly, like her body didn't belong to her anymore. And there he was. Damian Cross. 6'4". Broad shoulders. Black suit jacket open, no tie, crisp white shirt half unbuttoned like he'd been pulled away from something important. Tattoos traced up the side of his neck and disappeared under his collar. His hair was neatly cut. His jaw looked carved from stone. But it was his eyes that made Elena's stomach drop. Cold gray eyes. Eyes that didn't blink at fear. Eyes that didn't soften for anyone. Eyes that had built an empire in Chicago without ever needing to raise their voice twice. Elena dropped her gaze instantly. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "It won't happen again." Silence. Damian didn't respond right away. He just looked at her like he was reading her the way he read people in business meetings, figuring out what kind of threat they were, what kind of lie they were hiding. He stepped closer. One slow step. Then another. Elena's heart hammered so loud she was sure he could hear it. She hugged her arms close to her body, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. Trying to hide the soreness in her wrist. Trying to hide the bruise blooming beneath the collar of her uniform. Damian's gaze dropped. Not to her face. To her wrist. The red mark circling it like a fingerprint. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Look at me," he said. Elena swallowed. Her throat burned. She lifted her gaze just enough to meet his eyes. His expression didn't change. Still calm, still controlled, but something shifted in the air. Like the temperature dropped without warning. Elena tried to back up, but the counter was behind her. Nowhere to go. Damian walked past her without another word. For one breathless second, Elena thought he was leaving. Then she heard it. A sound that made every nerve in her body go rigid. Click. The kitchen door locked. The echo of that lock felt louder than it should have, like a gavel sealing a verdict. Elena's breath caught. She was alone in the kitchen. Locked in. With Damian Cross. In her head, she saw every rumor she'd ever heard in this city. That Damian Cross didn't forgive mistakes. That Damian Cross didn't tolerate theft, lies, disrespect. That Damian Cross didn't keep problems alive. Her knees threatened to fold. Damian turned slowly, resting one hand on the marble island like he owned the world and didn't need to prove it. Then he spoke again, softer this time. More dangerous. "Who hurt you?" The question hit Elena harder than a slap. Her eyes widened. This wasn't accusation. This wasn't interrogation. It sounded like protection. And that was worse. Because anger was predictable. Anger was something you could survive by staying quiet. But concern from a man like Damian Cross? That meant someone had stepped on something they didn't understand. Elena's lips parted. No words came out. Damian's gaze didn't move. It stayed locked on her face, calm and unforgiving. "You're shaking," he said. "Your wrist is marked. And you flinched when I walked near you." Elena's mouth went dry. He noticed everything. Damien Cross leaned slightly forward. "I'm going to ask again," he said, voice still low. "Who did it?" Elena wanted to lie. She needed to lie. Because the truth would start a war she couldn't survive. But her eyes burned. Her chest felt too tight. Her body was exhausted from pretending. So she tried to dodge the question. "It was nothing," she whispered. Damien didn't blink. "Nothing doesn't leave fingerprints," he replied. Elena's throat tightened. I just slipped earlier," she lied, and hated herself for it. Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped closer again, close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, expensive and sharp, like cedar and smoke. He lifted his hand slowly. Elena flinched hard, turning her face away instinctively. She hated that reaction. Hated how it revealed everything she was trying to hide. Damien's hand stopped mid-air. He didn't touch her. He just watched her flinch, and his eyes went colder than ice. "Someone taught you to be afraid of hands," he said quietly. Elena forced herself to look at him again, but tears were filling her eyes now. Damien's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Tell me," he said, "or I start guessing." Elena's voice cracked. "Please, don't make this worse." Damien's expression didn't soften, but his voice dropped even lower. "Elena," he said, saying her name like he'd known it forever. "It already is worse. The question is whether you survive it." That made her snap her eyes up. "How do you know my name?" she asked before she could stop herself. Damien didn't answer immediately. He looked away for half a second, as if something irritated him. Then he looked back at her and said something that chilled her more than the locked door. "I know everyone in my house." Elena swallowed hard. Of course he did. She was a maid. A shadow. A piece of furniture. And yet he noticed her bruises. Why? Elena's mind raced. She thought about the man who had cornered her upstairs. The man who thought the boss would never care. Vince Maddox. Security supervisor. Damien's trusted man, at least on paper. A tall, thick-armed guy with a grin that always felt like a threat. He'd been in this mansion longer than anyone. He walked around like he owned the staff. And he'd been targeting Elena for weeks. Small comments at first. "You're too quiet. Pretty girls shouldn't look so scared." Then the accidental touches. His hand brushing her waist as she passed. His fingers grabbing her wrist when she tried to walk away. Until tonight. Tonight he trapped her in the laundry room. No cameras. No witnesses. "You think you're too good for me?" Vince whispered, pressing her against the dryer so hard her back hit metal. Elena tried to push him away. He grabbed her wrist and twisted it until stars burst behind her eyes. "Stop," she gasped. Vince smiled. "That's the thing about working in this house, sweetheart. You're not a person. You're property." Then he leaned in and hissed, "And if you tell anyone, I'll make sure you disappear so clean they won't even find a hair." Elena swallowed down a sob, then lowered her eyes back to the present. Damien Cross was staring at her, waiting. Elena's hands shook so badly she had to press them to the counter. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't say it." Damien didn't move. "Why?" he asked. Elena's voice turned desperate. "Because it won't matter. Because he'll deny it. Because he has people. Because I'm just the maid." Silence. Damien's gaze sharpened. He repeated. "So it's a man." Elena froze. She hadn't meant to say that. Damien took one slow breath. "Who?" he said again, and this time it wasn't a question, it was an order. Elena's eyes filled with tears, and the dam finally broke. "Vince," she whispered. "Vince Maddox." The moment the name left her mouth, the air in the kitchen changed. It became heavier. Dangerous. Damien's expression went completely still. Like a statue. Like a judge. Like death, deciding. Elena's heart raced. She immediately regretted it. She imagined Vince finding out. Imagined him cornering her again. Imagined her being dragged out of the mansion in the middle of the night. But Damien didn't shout, didn't curse, didn't react the way she expected. He simply turned his head slightly, staring toward the dark hallway beyond the kitchen like he could see through walls. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. Too calm. "Vince Maddox put his hands on you," he said, not asking, confirming. Elena nodded, wiping tears with trembling fingers. He said I'm property." Damien's jaw flexed once. Just once. It was the only sign of emotion. But Elena felt the shift. Like something monstrous inside him had just woken up. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed one line. Hit send. Elena's stomach dropped. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Damien didn't look at her. "I'm making sure you're not lying," he said. Elena's breath caught. "I'm not lying." Damien's eyes finally snapped back to hers, and the coldness in them made her feel pinned to the wall. "If you're lying," he said, "you just signed your own sentence." Elena's throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. She realized then, Damien Cross wasn't a hero. He wasn't a soft man. If she was telling the truth, he would destroy Vince. If she was lying, he would destroy her. Elena's voice came out small. "I'm telling the truth." Damien stared at her for another long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he took off his suit jacket. Elena blinked, confused. He stepped closer and draped the jacket around her shoulders. The warmth hit her like a shock. And then Damien did something that made her forget how to breathe. He reached out, gently, carefully, and lifted her bruised wrist into the light. Not rough. Not possessive. Like he was looking at proof. Elena trembled. Damien studied the mark, then let her wrist go. His voice dropped to a whisper. "He did this tonight." Elena nodded, tears falling again. Damien's eyes darkened. "I gave Vince a lot," he said quietly. "A position. Trust. A name people feared." Elena swallowed hard. Damien leaned in slightly, so close his voice felt like it lived inside her ear. "And the moment a man forgets whose house he's standing in," he murmured, "he becomes an example." A shiver ran through Elena's body. Not because of fear. Because she believed him. Then Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. And for the first time, Elena saw something flash across his face. Something sharp. Furious. He looked at her again. "Stay here," he said. Elena's voice shook. "What are you going to do?" Damien turned toward the door, hand on the lock. His answer was quiet. Final. "I'm going to find Vince." Elena's heart pounded. "Damien, please, if you confront him, he'll—" Damien glanced back over his shoulder. And what Elena saw in his eyes made her go cold. Not anger. Not rage. Control. The kind of control that only belonged to men who knew exactly how to end someone. "He won't touch you again," Damien said. Then he unlocked the door. The lock clicked open. And as Damien stepped into the dark hallway, Elena realized something horrifying. She didn't just confess to the Mafia boss. She lit the match. And now the whole mansion was about to burn. Because somewhere upstairs, Vince Maddox had no idea what was coming. And the worst part, Elena didn't know whether Damien Cross was protecting her. Or claiming her. Elena didn't move for a long time after Damien Cross left the kitchen. The suit jacket he'd placed around her shoulders still held his warmth, heavy, expensive, and wrong on her body, like she was wearing a storm. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She kept replaying his last words. "He won't touch you again." Men had promised her things before. Teachers. Supervisors. A landlord once. Promises were cheap. But Damien Cross didn't sound like a man making a promise. He sounded like a man issuing a sentence. And that terrified her more than anything Vince Maddox had ever done. Because Vince was cruel. Damien was final. Elena tried to breathe. Tried to quiet the pounding in her ears. The kitchen lights were too bright now, exposing every weakness. She should have run. She should have taken the unlocked door as a sign and gotten out. But where would she go? Outside was freezing Chicago night. Inside this mansion were armed men, cameras, and rules she didn't understand. And Damien Cross, whether he meant to or not, had made her part of his world with one question and one locked door. Her stomach churned. Then, faintly, she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway. Fast. Purposeful. Not Damien's. Multiple. Elena's breath caught. She backed toward the counter instinctively, as if granite could protect her. The kitchen door swung open. A man stepped in, a guard, mid-30s, clean haircut, wearing black tactical clothing. His eyes scanned the room like he expected danger. Then he saw her. His expression shifted, confusion first, then recognition. "Elena," he said, quieter. She didn't answer. He looked past her, as if expecting Damien to appear behind her. "He told you to stay here," the guard said. Elena swallowed. "Who are you?" The guard hesitated, like he wasn't used to being questioned by staff. "Miles," he said. "Head of house security under Mr. Cross." That name carried weight. Head of security meant he was close. Close meant dangerous. Miles's gaze moved to the suit jacket around Elena's shoulders. His eyes narrowed slightly. Then he said something that made Elena's skin prickle. "Did Vince touch you?" Elena froze. "What?" Miles's jaw tightened. "Answer." Elena's throat went dry. "Why are you asking me that?" Miles took a slow breath, like he was trying not to scare her, but didn't know how to be gentle. "Because Mr. Cross doesn't lock doors," he said. "Not for anybody." Elena's heart dropped. Miles continued, voice low. "And he doesn't give his jacket to anybody either." Elena's hands trembled. "I told him what happened." Miles stared at her for a long second, then looked away, as if bracing himself for what was coming next. "Stay here," he said again, firmer. "And don't open this door for anyone except me." "Understood." Elena nodded, barely. Miles left as quickly as he came, shutting the door behind him. Elena was alone again. But now she understood something. If Damien Cross was involved, this wasn't just her problem anymore. This was about to become everyone's problem. Upstairs, in the security wing, Vince Maddox was laughing. He had his feet on a desk, chewing on a toothpick like he owned the building. A sports game played silently on a wall-mounted TV. Two junior guards stood nearby, trying to look busy. Vince waved his hand at one of them. "Bring me coffee." The guard hesitated. "Sir, the night chef." Vince's eyes cut to him. "Did I ask you to talk back?" The guard swallowed and left. Vince smirked to himself. He loved this part, the way men obeyed without argument. That's what power was. And Vince had power. Not just because he wore the security badge. Because Damien Cross trusted him. Or at least, Damien Cross had trusted him long enough to let him run things. Vince was leaning back in his chair when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He frowned and answered. "Yeah." A voice came through, flat, professional. "Mr. Cross requests your presence." "No." Vince sat up slowly. "Requests? Who is this?" "Miles." The name hit Vince's spine like ice. Miles didn't call people unless Damien ordered it. Vince's throat tightened. "What's this about?" A pause. Then Miles said, "You know what it's about." The call ended. Vince stared at his phone, pulse suddenly loud. For the first time that night, Vince didn't look like a man with power. He looked like a man who had just realized he might have made a mistake. Damien Cross was in his office on the main floor when Vince arrived. It wasn't an office designed for comfort. It was designed like everything Damien owned, clean, sharp, intimidating. A long dark desk. Minimal decorations. One framed photograph face down, like even memories weren't allowed to relax here. Two guards stood by the door. Miles stood behind Damien, hands folded behind his back. Damien didn't look up when Vince walked in. Vince forced a casual smile. "Boss. Didn't expect you up this late." Damien continued reading the file in front of him. For a few seconds, the silence was so thick Vince could almost taste it. Then Damien spoke. "Close the door." Vince's smile froze. He glanced at the guards, then back at Damien. "Is something wrong?" Damien finally lifted his gaze. Cold gray eyes locked onto Vince like a scope. "Close the door," Damien repeated, slower. Vince turned and closed it. Click. The lock engaged. The sound made Vince's stomach twist. Damien stood up from behind the desk. He moved like a controlled machine, no wasted motion, no nervous energy. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of Vince. Close enough that Vince could see the faint scars on Damien's knuckles. Damien didn't raise his voice. That was the terrifying part. "Where were you between 12:10 and 12:30? Damien asked. Vince blinked, surprised. "What?" Damien's eyes didn't move. "Answer." Vince let out a short laugh, forcing confidence. "Boss, what is this? Some kind of—" Damien stepped closer by 1 inch. Vince's laugh died in his throat. "I asked you a question," Damien said. Vince swallowed. I was doing rounds." Damien's expression didn't change. "Which floor?" Vince hesitated. "Second floor." Damien nodded slowly, as if confirming something. Then he turned his head slightly toward Miles. Miles handed Damien a tablet. Damien tapped the screen once and turned it toward Vince. It was security footage. A hallway camera. The laundry room hallway upstairs. Vince watched himself on the screen, walking toward the laundry room at 12:14 a.m. Then he watched himself stop, look around, and step inside. The video didn't show what happened inside. But it showed enough. Vince's skin prickled. Damien's voice remained calm. "Why did you enter the laundry room at 12:14 a.m.? Vince tried to think fast. There was a noise report." Damien cut him off with one word. "Lie." Vince's mouth went dry. Damien tapped another clip. Different camera. Another angle. This one showed Elena leaving the laundry room at 12:27 a.m. Her posture hunched. Her face turned down. She clutched her wrist. Even in grainy footage, her fear was visible. Damien stared at Vince while the video played. "I don't like lies," Damien said softly. Vince's heart hammered. He forced a shrug. "Boss, I don't know what you're implying, but she's staff. Maybe she hurt herself." Damien's hand shot out suddenly and grabbed Vince's collar. Not violent. Not frantic. Just absolute. Damien yanked Vince close enough that their faces were inches apart. Vince's eyes widened. Damien's voice was a whisper. "Say her name." Vince swallowed. "What?" Damien's grip tightened slightly, enough to remind Vince he could crush his windpipe if he wanted. "Say," Damien repeated, "her name." Vince's voice shook. "Elena." Damien's eyes went darker. "Good," Damien said. "Now tell me what you did to her." Vince's throat worked. "I didn't do anything. She's trying to set me up. She's—" Damien released Vince and stepped back. Then he did something that confused Vince. Damien walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the desk and opened it. Inside was a gold ring. Simple. Heavy. Not flashy like jewelry. More like a symbol. Vince stared at it, confused. Damien pointed at the ring. "Do you know what that is?" Vince hesitated. "No." Damien's eyes stayed on him. "That ring belonged to my mother." Vince's face tightened. "Boss, what does that have to do with?" Damien's voice sharpened slightly. "My mother cleaned houses. Just like Elena." The room went still. Miles's posture stiffened behind Damien. Vince suddenly realized the trap he'd walked into. Damien wasn't angry because a maid cried in his kitchen. Damien was angry because the maid reminded him of something personal. And personal meant lethal. Damien leaned forward, placing both hands on the desk. "Every man in this city feared my name," Damien said quietly. "But when I was 12, the only thing my mother feared was the man who thought she was property." Vince's mouth opened. No words came. Damien's eyes locked onto Vince. "So I'm going to ask you one last time," Damien said. "And you're going to decide whether you die quickly or slowly." Vince's voice cracked. "Boss, please." Damien cut him off. What did you do to her? Vince's panic finally broke through his arrogance. He raised his hands slightly, defensive. It wasn't like that. I just grabbed her wrist. She was acting smart. She needed discipline. The second Vince said the word discipline, Damien moved. He stepped forward and punched Vince in the stomach so hard Vince folded, coughing, gasping. Two guards grabbed Vince's arms before he could fall. Damien didn't look emotional. He looked disgusted. He leaned down near Vince's ear and spoke so softly Vince could barely hear him. You're going to apologize to her. Vince coughed, eyes watering. Damien straightened. And then, he added, you're going to tell me every time you've touched any woman in this house. Vince's head snapped up, terror flooding his face. What? Damien's voice was calm again. Worse than calm. Because if you did it to her, Damien said, you've done it before. Miles stepped forward. Boss, the staff quarters. Damien raised a hand, silencing him. Then Damien looked directly at Vince. You thought she was invisible, Damien said. You thought no one would care. Damien paused. Then he said the sentence that made Vince's eyes widen in pure horror. Bring Elena here. Vince jerked violently. No, don't bring her. Damien's gaze was ice. You will look her in the eyes, he said, and you will beg for forgiveness. Vince's voice cracked. Boss, please. Damien turned his back like Vince was already dead. Miles nodded to the guards. One guard headed toward the kitchen wing. As the door opened, Vince realized what was about to happen. Elena would see him like this, broken, exposed. And if she spoke again, Damien Cross would end him. Vince's fear turned into something else, rage. He yanked against the guards, eyes wild. I'll kill her, Vince shouted suddenly. You hear me? She's nothing. The room fell silent. Even Miles looked shocked. Damien stopped walking. Slowly, he turned his head. And for the first time that night, Damien Cross smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just been given permission. Damien's voice was barely above a whisper. Now, he said, I don't have to wonder if she's telling the truth. Elena knew something was wrong the moment Miles returned. He didn't knock this time. He opened the kitchen door slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something fragile. Elena, he said. Her body stiffened. She had been standing in the same spot for nearly 20 minutes, Damien's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like armor she didn't deserve. Her voice came out thin. Is he angry? Miles studied her face, then shook his head once. No, he said. That terrified her more. Because if Damien Cross was angry, you could predict violence. If he was calm, something calculated was happening. Miles stepped aside. He wants you upstairs. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Why? Miles didn't soften it. Because this ends tonight. Elena's breath faltered. Ends. That word had too many meanings in a house like this. She hesitated only for a second before stepping forward. Running now would mean guilt. And she wasn't guilty. But she felt like prey walking willingly into a lion's den. The hallway felt longer than usual. Staff members were awake now. Doors cracked open. Eyes peeking out. Whispers moving like wind. Elena. Is that the girl? Why is she wearing his jacket? That last whisper followed her like a shadow. Because she was still wearing Damien's suit jacket. And in this mansion, that meant something. Power here wasn't announced. It was shown. Miles stopped outside Damien's office. The door was slightly open. Voices inside. One of them strained. Panicked. Vince. Elena's stomach twisted. Miles glanced down at her. When you walk in there, don't look at the guards. Don't look at me. Look only at Mr. Cross. Elena nodded, barely breathing. Miles pushed the door open fully. The office felt colder than the kitchen. Sharper. Brighter. Vince was on his knees. His hands restrained behind his back by two guards. His face was pale. Sweat lined his forehead. The arrogance he wore like cologne was gone. Damien stood near the window, back turned to the room, city lights reflecting off the glass behind him. He didn't turn immediately. Elena stepped inside slowly. The door shut behind her. The sound made Vince jerk his head up. His eyes locked onto hers. And for a moment, she saw something raw in them. Fear. Then hatred. "You," Vince spat. One guard tightened his grip. Damien finally turned. His gray eyes landed on Elena. Not soft. Not hard. Assessing. "You're safe," he said simply. It wasn't comfort. It was a statement of fact. Elena swallowed and nodded. Damien walked toward Vince. "Repeat what you said earlier," Damien ordered calmly. Vince's jaw clenched. Silence. Damien crouched slightly so his voice met Vince's ear. "Or I let her decide what happens next." Vince's breathing grew uneven. Elena's stomach tightened. What was Damien doing? Vince's eyes darted between them. "I grabbed her," he muttered. "Louder," Damien said. Vince's jaw flexed. "I grabbed her wrist." "And?" Damien pressed. Vince swallowed. "I cornered her." Elena's heart pounded violently. Hearing it spoken out loud felt surreal. Like watching someone describe a nightmare she tried to convince herself wasn't real. Damien didn't blink. "Why?" he asked. Vince hesitated. Damien nodded once to the guard. The guard twisted Vince's arm slightly. Vince winced. "Because I could," he shouted suddenly, cracking. "Because she's staff. Because no one cares about staff." The words echoed, and in that echo, something shifted in the room. Damien straightened slowly. Then he turned, not to Vince, to Elena. "Do you care?" Damien asked her. Elena blinked, confused. "What?" she whispered. "Do you care?" Damien repeated, voice steady. "That he thought you were nothing?" Her chest tightened. She had spent her entire life believing that. Nothing. Disposable. Temporary. Elena lifted her chin slightly. "Yes," she said. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. And something inside her steadied. Damien nodded once. Then he did something none of them expected. He stepped aside, giving Elena a clear view of Vince. "Walk closer," Damien told her. Her pulse roared in her ears. But she moved. One step. Then another. Until she stood only a few feet from Vince. He tried to glare at her, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. "You did this," Elena said quietly, lifting her bruised wrist. Vince looked away. "Look at her," Damien ordered. The guard forced Vince's chin up. Their eyes met. Elena felt something she didn't expect. Not fear. Not weakness. Control. For the first time since she arrived at this mansion, she wasn't invisible. Vince's voice broke. "I was wrong." Damien's gaze shifted to Elena. "Do you accept that?" he asked. The question stunned her. Accept. No one had ever asked what she wanted after being hurt. Elena's voice was steady now. "No." The room went silent. Vince's eyes widened. Damien's expression didn't change, but something approving flickered behind his gaze. "Then what do you want?" Damien asked. Elena's heart pounded. She didn't want blood. She didn't want to watch someone die. She just wanted to know he can't do it again, she said. Damien studied her face carefully. Then he nodded. He looked at Vince. "You threatened her life," Damien said quietly. "You said she was nothing." Vince's breathing grew frantic. "Boss, please." Damien's voice remained calm. "You mistake my house for chaos." He stepped closer. "In this house, everyone is protected by my name." Vince's eyes filled with panic. "I was loyal." Damien tilted his head slightly. "Loyalty without discipline is rot," he replied. Then he nodded once to Miles. Miles stepped forward. "Strip him of rank," Damien ordered. "Remove his clearance. Remove his weapons access." Vince's face drained of color. "No, no, boss, don't." "And," Damien continued, "escort him to the basement holding level." Vince's breathing turned ragged. "You can't." Damien's eyes hardened. "Watch me." The guards lifted Vince roughly. As they dragged him toward the door, Vince twisted his head toward Elena one last time. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You think he cares about you? You're just a replacement." The door slammed shut behind him. Silence. Elena stood frozen. Replacement. The word echoed strangely. Damien dismissed the guards with a flick of his fingers. Soon it was just him and her. The office felt smaller now. He studied her again. "You handled that well," he said. Elena blinked. "You didn't kill him." Damien's expression didn't shift. "Not yet," he replied. Her stomach dropped. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. Damien walked back toward the window. "Because death is simple," he said. "And simple doesn't teach lessons." Elena's pulse slowed slightly. "Then what will you do?" she asked. Damien's reflection in the glass looked colder than the city behind him. "I'll make him understand consequence." The way he said it made her spine chill. But then he turned back to her. And for a brief second, his eyes softened. "Did he hurt you before tonight?" he asked. Elena hesitated. She could lie. End it here. But something about the way Damien stood, steady, waiting, made her answer honestly. "Yes." Damien's jaw tightened. "How many times?" She looked down. 3. The air seemed to thicken. Damien closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the cold was gone, replaced by something deeper. Rage. Controlled. But alive. "Elena," he said carefully, "this house answers to me." She nodded slowly. "You are not property," he continued. Her throat tightened. "And you are not invisible." The words hit her harder than she expected. Invisible. That's how she survived her whole life. But hearing someone powerful deny it felt dangerous. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Damien held her gaze. "Because I promised myself something when I was 12, he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "If I ever had power," he continued, "I would never allow what happened to my mother to happen under my roof." The room fell silent. Suddenly Vince's words made sense. Replacement. Elena wasn't just a maid. She was a reminder. A ghost of a woman Damien couldn't save years ago. And now he was rewriting history with her standing in the center. That realization frightened her more than Vince ever had. Because being protected by a man like Damien Cross meant being tied to him. And ties in this world weren't easily broken. A knock interrupted the silence. Miles stepped inside. "Boss," he said quietly, "2 more staff members are requesting to speak." Damien's eyes sharpened. "About Vince," Miles clarified. Elena's heart skipped. 2 more. Damien looked at her. And she saw it clearly now. This wasn't about one incident. This was about rot. And she had just exposed it. Damien nodded once to Miles. "Bring them." Miles stepped out again. Elena's breath quickened. "What's happening?" she whispered. Damien's voice was calm. "Truth spreads quickly once someone is brave enough to speak." Her hands trembled slightly. "I didn't mean to start something." Damien looked at her. "You didn't start it," he said. "You ended it." Footsteps approached. 2 young women, housekeeping staff, entered hesitantly. Both avoided eye contact. Both carried the same posture Elena recognized too well. Fear. Damien didn't speak. He let the silence do the work. One of the women finally whispered, "He did it to me too." Elena felt her chest tighten. The other nodded slowly. The room changed again. This wasn't one accusation. It was a pattern. Damien's face became unreadable. But his eyes promised war. He looked at Elena once more. "You were right not to accept his apology," he said quietly. Then he turned toward Miles. "Prepare the council room." Miles nodded immediately. Elena frowned. "Council." Damien's gaze shifted back to her. "If rot spreads," he said calmly, "it must be cut out publicly." Her stomach dropped. Publicly meant witnesses. Witnesses meant power shifts. And in this world, Power shifts always drew blood. Damien stepped closer to her. "You're not invisible anymore, Elena," he said. "And tomorrow, everyone in this house will know it." Her pulse raced. She didn't know if that was protection or a warning. By sunrise, the mansion no longer felt like a house. It felt like a courtroom. Word had spread faster than fire. Staff moved carefully. Guards stood straighter. Conversations died the moment footsteps echoed down the hall. Everyone knew something was happening. And everyone knew who started it. Elena stood in her small staff bedroom staring at herself in the mirror. She hadn't slept. Damien's jacket was gone. Miles had taken it back quietly at some point in the night. Now she wore a simple black dress instead of her maid uniform. Miles had delivered it with only one sentence. "Mr. Cross doesn't want you in uniform today." That alone sent a ripple through the staff. No uniform meant no rank. No rank meant something had shifted. Elena's hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric down. She didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed. A knock came at her door. "Miles." "It's time," he said. The council room sat on the lower level of the mansion. Elena had never been inside. Staff weren't allowed there. It was where Damien held meetings with captains, financiers, and men whose names were whispered in Chicago's underworld. When the doors opened, Elena felt every pair of eyes in the room land on her. A long polished table filled the center. At the head sat Damien Cross. Controlled. Unreadable. On either side of the table were his captains and senior guards. Vince Maddox stood restrained near the far wall. Bruised. Disheveled. Terrified. Elena's heart pounded. This was bigger than she imagined. Damien motioned for her to step forward. She walked to the center of the room, painfully aware of how out of place she looked. A maid among wolves. Damien rose from his chair slowly. The room fell silent. "Last night," Damien began, voice steady and measured, "a line was crossed in this house. No one moved. No one under my roof," he continued, "is to be touched, threatened, or diminished." His eyes swept the table. "You all answer to me. So does the staff." Vince shifted, panic rising in his eyes. Damien turned toward him. Vince Maddox abused his position. A murmur rippled faintly through the captains. Damien didn't raise his voice. He mistook authority for ownership. He gestured toward Elena. She came forward. Every gaze shifted to her again. Elena's pulse thundered. Damien continued, and because she spoke, two others followed. Silence. A captain near the left side leaned forward slightly. "Is this verified?" he asked carefully. Damien's gaze cut to him. "Do you doubt my process?" The captain immediately lowered his eyes. "No, Mr. Cross." Damien nodded once. "Good." He walked toward Vince. Each step deliberate. Vince's breathing turned shallow. "Look at her," Damien ordered. The guards forced Vince's head up. Vince's eyes met Elena's. There was no arrogance left. Only desperation. Damien faced the room. "In this organization, loyalty is currency," he said. "But discipline is law." He paused. "And law does not bend." Elena felt the weight of those words. This wasn't emotional. This wasn't revenge. This was governance. Damien stopped directly in front of Vince. "You will confess," he said quietly. Vince swallowed. "I." Damien raised a hand slightly. Vince flinched. "I cornered her," Vince said loudly. "I grabbed her. I threatened her." The words echoed off the walls. "And the others?" Damien pressed. Vince closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." The confession hung in the air like smoke. One of the captains leaned back slowly. Another shook his head. Damien's face remained expressionless. "Power," Damien said, turning back to the table, "is not license." He stepped toward his seat, but didn't sit. Vince Maddox no longer holds rank. The guards removed the insignia patch from Vince's uniform immediately. The tearing sound felt louder than it should have. "He will forfeit all assets tied to this house." Vince's eyes widened. "Boss, please." Damien didn't look at him. And, Damien continued, he will be handed to Chicago authorities anonymously with full evidence. The room went still. That was unexpected. Police involvement was rare. Calculated. Public. Vince's knees nearly buckled. "You can't do that," he whispered hoarsely. Damien's gaze snapped to him. "I can do anything," he replied calmly. Vince's breathing grew frantic. "You'll ruin me." Damien stepped closer. "You ruined yourself." Then Damien delivered the final blow. "Escort him." The guards dragged Vince toward the exit. Vince twisted violently. "Elena!" he shouted. "You think he saved you? You think this makes you safe?" His eyes burned with hatred. "You just became visible." The doors slammed shut behind him. Silence swallowed the room. Elena stood frozen. Visible. The word hit differently now. Damien returned to the head of the table. He rested his hands on the polished surface. "This house runs on order," he said. "And anyone who mistakes silence for weakness will learn otherwise." His eyes shifted to Elena. "And from today forward, staff report directly to Miles." A structural shift. Protection formalized. Then Damien did something that stunned the room. "Elena Brooks," he said clearly. Her throat tightened. "You will no longer serve as maid." The captains exchanged subtle glances. She blinked. "What?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Damien's gaze didn't waver. "You will oversee internal staff compliance." Her breath caught. "That means," he clarified, "you will report misconduct directly to me." The weight of that sentence shook the room. A maid. Reporting directly to Damien Cross. Unheard of. Elena felt dizzy. I'm not qualified." Damien cut her off gently but firmly. "You are qualified to recognize what harm looks like." Silence. "And you are brave enough to speak." The room absorbed that. Power was shifting in real time. Elena's voice trembled. "Why me?" Damien studied her carefully. "Because you know what invisibility feels like." His tone lowered slightly. "And you won't allow it again." Her chest tightened. She didn't ask for power. But she understood something now. Damien wasn't rescuing her. He was reshaping his house. And she had become the catalyst. One of the captains cleared his throat cautiously. "Mr. Cross, this sets a precedent." Damien nodded. "Yes," he agreed. "It does." The captain leaned back. No further objection. Damien's authority was absolute. He dismissed the room with a subtle gesture. The captains rose and exited quietly. Soon it was just Damien and Elena. The council room felt larger now. Quieter. Elena exhaled shakily. "I didn't expect this," she admitted. Damien's expression softened slightly, not weakness, but understanding. "No one expects consequence until it arrives," he said. She hesitated. "You didn't kill him." Damien tilted his head faintly. "Not all endings require death." He stepped closer. "But some require permanence." Elena searched his face. "Is this about your mother?" she asked softly. A long pause. Damien didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight. "When she cried," he said quietly, "no one locked a door for her." The air shifted. "This house," he continued, "will not repeat that history." Elena felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Not fear. Not gratitude. Something steadier. Respect. But respect for a man like Damien Cross came with danger. "Am I safe?" she asked honestly. Damien met her gaze. "As long as you stand under my protection," he said. The phrasing mattered. Under. Protection in this world meant allegiance. And allegiance meant permanence. Her pulse slowed slightly. "And if I leave?" she asked. Damien's eyes darkened just a fraction. "Then you leave with knowledge." A warning wrapped in calm delivery. She understood. This world wasn't one you stepped out of casually. But something inside her had changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. And invisibility had never protected her anyway. Footsteps approached the doorway. Miles appeared quietly. "Boss," he said, "Chicago PD confirmed pickup." Damien nodded once. "It's done." Miles stepped back. Elena let out a slow breath. It was over. Or so she thought. Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. His expression shifted slightly. Not anger. Not concern. Recognition. "Elena," he said slowly. Her stomach tightened. "What?" He turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a photograph. A newspaper clipping. Old. Faded. A woman standing outside a Chicago brownstone. Young. Tired. Familiar. Elena's breath caught. She knew that face. Because she saw it every time she looked in a mirror. "That's my mother," she whispered. Damien's eyes locked onto hers. "I know," he said quietly. The room felt suddenly smaller. "How?" she breathed. Damien's voice dropped. "Because she once worked in this house." Silence detonated between them. Elena's mind spun. "What are you saying?" Damien stepped closer. "I'm saying," he said carefully, "you didn't just walk into my mansion by accident." Her heart thundered. "I made sure you were hired." Everything inside her went still. "You, what?" Damien's gaze was steady. "Your mother disappeared 18 years ago." Her chest tightened painfully. No one investigated. Her pulse roared. "I did." The world tilted. "You knew her," Elena whispered. Damien's expression hardened slightly. "I was 12. The same age he mentioned before. The pieces began to align in terrifying clarity. "You were there," she said slowly. Damien didn't deny it. "She protected me once," he said. "And I failed to protect her." Elena's breath shook. "This isn't just about Vince," she realized. "No," Damien agreed quietly. "It never was." The truth settled like stone. She hadn't just exposed a predator. She had stepped into a history soaked in unfinished consequences. And Damien Cross wasn't just protecting her. He was correcting the past. Elena stared at him, heart racing. "What happened to her?" she whispered. Damien's eyes darkened. "That," he said softly, "is what we're going to find out." The council room suddenly felt like the beginning of something far bigger than a single night's reckoning. Elena realized the mansion wasn't burning. It was waking up. And whatever secrets lived in its foundation, they were about to surface.